1. Okay, preface. Not technically front desk, but central res for a small brand of local resorts. We have 9 total properties, and I take calls for 8 of them. It's our busiest part of the year because our area is considered a sort of climate haven, and everyone in the whole world wants to come here to get out of the heat. Also, very, very big lake. People love a lake view. You can sell someone on a lake view. Also pretty unique places, all with very different policies. Certainly isn't an easy job, but working from home is quite cushy and gives you the opportunity to match psychotic guest energy in ways you can't elsewhere. All our properties in one of the more popular areas are completely booked for this weekend, and honestly most weekends throughout the summer, and into the fall when the leaves change at this point. Plus, the never-ending weddings. Anyway, yeah, very, very busy. Nearly impossible to get a room last minute anywhere. People book a year in advance if they're smart, so today, guest called in and said, "Hello, I'd like a room for this weekend, please. We have 2 adults, blah blah." I, of course, reply, as I do every single time I'm asked that question during our busy season, "Sure, let me see if we have anything left for this weekend." Guest immediately gets frantic and defensive and says he saw a room on the website just 10 minutes ago and he knows there's one available. I'm pretty confused, but whatever, I say, "Yeah, okay, looks like I have 1 room left for this weekend and it could work for you." Give him the details on this room and the quote, as I always do. I know what I say every time because it's 75% the same every single time. He stops me and says, "If you had a room, why did you say you didn't?" all accusatorially. So I'm obviously caught off guard and I say, "I never said we didn't have any rooms." And he says, "Yes, I did," and I say, "No, I said what I said before, the script, you know." And he says, "No, I definitely told him that there were absolutely no rooms left," as if I didn't just quote him for a room. Again, I say what I had told him before. Finally, he says to me, with the utmost audacity, "Well, you're lying, but I'll book," and I honestly didn't care to hear more, so that's when I hung up. You can call me a liar, sir, but when everyone is going to be calling you on your landline because that was the last room within 50 miles, you more than likely aren't getting it. Have a nice weekend at home. Had a good laugh with my coworker after that. We were both absolutely fed up with people today. Someone today asked her, in dead seriousness, to guarantee that it wouldn't rain during their stay 2 months from now. Apparently she was audibly disgruntled after that, so she must have meant it. 2. Some background. Night auditor in the touristy south of the UK here. We offer free breakfast at our hotel. Night shift do the cooking until the cook comes in at 7, then they take over. Our breakfast manager moved over from housekeeping to the breakfast side for being a bully to the younger girls there. She used to occasionally do the breakfast cooking before her housekeeping shift, but she has since moved full-time to breakfast. I saw the writing on the wall day 1, as she was flaunting her new manager role to nights, saying that she is the boss now. This is a title GM gave her and nothing more. She does not outrank anyone on front desk, especially as typically I am the duty employee during her shifts. So instead of, cooking, she is always looking for faults in the kitchen from main service and getting involved with the front desk. Up to and including giving her opinions on guests to other guests and reading the handover notes for gossip. It's gotten to the point where she has been reprimanded twice for failing to keep up with the pace of breakfast cooking and making other members of staff feel belittled for her tone. I have personally experienced this from her with sly remarks and constant put-downs, and name-dropping the GM. But I tend to just let it slide, as it's only the last 2 hours of my shift where I have to deal with her. For some context, she is a 60-year-old woman who prides herself on having no filter and being brutally honest, and telling it how it is. The meat. We had a large group, 60-plus guests, comprised of an extended Indian family, who were on the whole very nice and courteous. While the glorified cook was in that morning, she approached me on the front desk. If you're unfamiliar in the UK, the shortening of the word Pakistani to its first 2 syllables has long been considered a racist slur against Pakistani and South Asian people as a whole. She asked me if the are in this morning. There was a group of 6 from this group sat behind her easily within earshot. I was shocked and quickly told her I hate that word and not to use it. She seemed confused about me for not liking her tone at all and asked,
"Well, are they in?"
I said, "We do have a large Indian group in this morning, yes." And then she reiterated that statement. I just turned away to the monitor, shaking my head, and prayed that the guest didn't hear her. She then says,
"I'm gonna hide the takeaway bags because I know what they're like."
I then told her to just go to the kitchen. Throughout service, her attitude stank, making comments about people in burqas being letterboxes and that we shouldn't let them in here. She could have anything under that. She said she wasn't cooking anymore because they were taking advantage, and that she refused to leave the kitchen to help tidy away because of people like that. I gritted my teeth and got through it because it was, frankly, too busy at the time cleaning up and trying to run the front desk solo. Well, I spoke to the GM after that shift and told him exactly what I have told you fine people today, and he said he would speak to her. I think the GM is a bit of a dick, but generally he runs things fine except for this. I also spoke to the deputy GM about this, as she is much more understanding and empathetic compared to our GM, and she assured me she would speak to the GM to ensure something is done about it. To my amazement, she is still employed here. I really don't like being a busybody like that, but I am tempted to go above her head to the hotel corporate, very large and well-known company, to get something done because I cannot see her changing her ways, and I do not want to look like I'm just okay with it. Any advice would be awesome, and thanks for listening to my rant. These guys were from Birmingham and had thick Midland accents, by the way. Hellfreezer's note: you could send an anonymous complaint and possibly get some friends of yours to do it as well, saying that they witnessed what happened and that they are shocked by the behavior and certainly would not consider patronizing your hotel again. It might help move things along if you're getting enough, bad press from the public about it. 3. My sister and I both work in similar fields, in the sense that we both deal with travelers. I have a job working as a travel agent, and thankfully post-pandemic, I was lucky enough to keep said job. My sister started working as an innkeeper for a major American hotel chain, and eventually got a much better position as an inspector within the chain. This job allows her to travel all throughout the country, and even though it can be a bit tiring, it has allowed her to have a better position in life than quite a few people. My job allows me to help people go on quite a few dream vacations, and in more than one instance, the perks that go along with the job have allowed me to go on quite a few with my own family. One of the great things about having a sister who works in a similar field is that there are times I can contact her if I have a customer that might, say, want to go somewhere within the country like Oregon. One of the most frequent questions I get is, what is there to do, or what kind of sites are worth taking in? In many cases, I'm able to ask the customer if they're comfortable with me contacting my sister, because she works in quite a few city locations, and she may be able to point out some things I'm not aware of. So during one of my work weeks, I find myself contacting her quite a bit, and the one area in question that came up quite often was Seattle. Now I knew, or at least I thought I knew, enough about Seattle to make a sale. My sister and I grew up listening to grunge music after all, and I pointed out some of the more obvious sites to see, such as the Space Needle and the Pike Place Market, and for a few of my customers that was enough to seal the proverbial deal. But I would get the occasional person that was on the fence, and that's where my sister would come into play. Long ago, when I started my job and she started to be able to travel for hers, she made it quite apparent to me that she took no issue with me sending her a text message to make sure she was free enough to maybe point out some things I wasn't aware of that might sweeten the deal. A couple of 20-something girls came into the office that day. They had vibrant neon-colored hair and tattoos. One of the girls had cheetah prints tattooed from her collarbone down to her wrist. I always admired the expressive type, and unlike quite a few people in my office who are set in their ways, treated them with a bit more respect than some of my usual clientele. Nothing personal, but I live in a rural part of Wyoming, and people who express that type of, let's say, off-the-wall nature are usually met with more disrespect than most. I'm not the type of person to pull that crap. It's unnecessary, and more often than not, you come to find that these people are usually quite interesting. These two tell me that they're looking to go on what they refer to as an unofficial honeymoon. And yes, they already knew about the Fishmongers, the Space Needle, and a few of the standing venues where groups like Soundgarden and Nirvana got their start. But they were looking for something a bit more within their realm of interests, so I sent my sister a text. She let me know during one of our conversations a couple of nights prior that she was actually heading to Seattle a little later on in the week. Lucky for me, she was taking a break from the road and therefore would be able to get in contact with me in a fairly quick manner. I ask her if she's okay being put on speakerphone. She is, and she proceeds to help me with my two customers. They ask her that all too familiar line of questioning in regards to out-of-the-way spots, things that people usually wouldn't recommend in lieu of the obvious tourist destinations, and eventually my sister lets them know that there's a convention coming to town. The girls get this tone in their voices as if their interest has been piqued, and ask what kind of convention. My sister hesitates for a minute before saying, I probably should not have mentioned that it's a furry convention, and from what I've been told, they can be a bit problematic. Maybe I can point you to some of the national parks and nature trails. The girls in front of me smile in a way as if they were told they had just won the lottery. The girl with the cheetah print tattoo speaks up with excitement in her voice. Oh no, it's okay. We're actually glad you mentioned that. We had no idea. My other half and I are furries, so that might actually be fun for us. My sister stammers as she responds, Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend. The same girl chuckles a bit, and I can tell that she's got a sweet nature with her response. No, ma'am, it's absolutely fine. We're used to it. We know that the furry scene isn't for everybody. We thank you for letting us know. No offense taken. Have a lovely day. The girls look at me and say they'll take the travel package. I thank my sister for her help. The rest of the day was business as usual. Relatively uneventful, frankly a bit boring. Work. Typical agency work. What I didn't know at the time was that the particular convention my sister mentioned to these two girls would go down in internet infamy. A few days ago, I get a phone call, a little bit after 11 p.m. from my sister. Now, this wasn't an unusual occurrence, time zone differences and all, but she was usually pretty good about taking that into consideration. When she called me this late at night, it was usually because she had to vent about something, and oh my god, vent she did. I'm not necessarily sure if I mentioned it or not, but my sister was visiting Seattle and not going there for work. Though she had been there a handful of times, she never really got a chance to experience the city in full, because she spent her time making sure the hotel rooms were in tip-top shape. Once she confirmed things were in order or addressed underlying problems, the chain would send her to another location, and off she went. So here she is, thinking she's going to be able to visit a few of the venues where Chris Cornell and Eddie Vedder played, as well as maybe eating at the rotating restaurant on the Space Needle, and instead she was treated to a situation that would populate her nightmares for years to come. I'm going to keep this next bit as sanitized as possible because I know how YouTube can be with explicit content, and I don't want to cause any problems. But my sister started out her day by watching a bunch of people dressed as anthropomorphic animals come flooding into the hotel lobby. At first she didn't think much of it. If anything, she admired a lot of the creativity she saw on display. It wasn't until later in the evening, when she was stuck on an elevator with several of them, and she was overwhelmed by the not-so-subtle hint of body odor and something else. She turns around to see somebody dressed like a donkey, wearing a pacifier around their neck, a baby bonnet, and an adult diaper. From what she tells me, the smell in that elevator indicated the diaper had been used for its intended purpose. Her appetite dead in the water, she just opted to go out and get a couple of drinks at one of the local bars. She's gone for a couple of hours at most. When she comes back, the scene has deteriorated into utter chaos. There are furries everywhere acting like drunken fraternity and sorority students. A few of them that were in no condition to do pretty much anything were sitting on the floors and lining the hotel hallways having loud and explicit conversations, talking about things they like to do in the bedroom. Please bear in mind, there were other people here that had nothing to do with this convention, and if they didn't hear those conversations going on, in my sister's words, it meant they were either deaf or dead. The comfortable buzz she had going on as she was coming back to her hotel room had started to subside. More than anything, she wanted to be in her room and locked away from this chaos, so she makes a break for the elevator. On her way, she admonishes the few people sitting in the hallway and asks them to keep their voices down and have some consideration for other people, only to be met with a bombardment of middle fingers encased in brightly colored faux fur gloves. At this point in the conversation, I can hear her voice starting to crack as she gets considerably angrier. She tells me that as she's waiting for her elevator, she's paying more attention to the idiots in the hallway than she is to the elevator itself. She hears the doors open, and the moment they do, the dumb patrol starts swinning like a bunch of high school students catching a couple of teachers kissing. She turns around to see a hyena with his back against the wall and a Siamese cat in front of them, giving a full-blown pork piccolo recital. My sister was so shocked she fell flat on her butt and started yelling at them. The hyena put his head down and rushed over to the button panel to shut the elevator doors, in full glory. It was at this point my sister opted to take the stairs. As she did, some more furries were busy throwing things at each other, ranging from garbage to water balloons. She tells me she doesn't think she's cursed that much in her life than she did that day. She tried to talk sense into a few of them and got the impression they were higher than a Justin Hawkins falsetto. So she just figured she would get back to her room and call hotel management to find out what exactly was being done about this. She finally makes her way back and gets into the room as quickly as possible. Mind you, by this point she's above the chaos, and she can still hear it going on below, and she basically describes to me that it sounds like a bunch of these individuals were trying out for a non-existent Caligula reboot. She eventually tells the hotel manager on the phone, and he is just as exasperated as she is. He realizes who he's talking to, and he tells her the police have been called to the hotel no less than 9 times over the past some odd hours, and they were on their way yet again. My sister realizes this poor man is doing the best he can given the circumstances, and she told him that even though she was on vacation, she would still go to bat for him if push came to shove. Oh, push certainly came to shove. After everything was over, chaos still continued to reign. That morning, an all-hands-on-deck email was sent out to every inspector in the chain, my sister included. She got in contact with the higher-ups and let them know that she was on vacation, but she wouldn't have a problem in trying to help survey the damage. After all, these creeps were everywhere, and she was trying her best not to imagine the sights that lie in store for her as well as her fellow inspectors. From what my sister tells me to this day, that was the longest walkthrough of any hotel she has ever had to inspect. Holes in random walls in certain rooms, things flushed down toilets that were never meant to be as such, resulting in septic-saturated floors, furniture so messed up it either had to be reupholstered or outright replaced. And this is just the stuff I can remember her telling me. Overall, the damage done came with a hefty price tag, some within the realm of $100,000. And this is before the hotel had to dole out refunds to patrons that weren't even involved in this horror show of a convention. By the time she finished telling me all of this, she'd calmed down, but I could still sense the exasperation in her voice. The hotel thanked her for taking time out of her vacation to help with this massive undertaking, and they issued her a sizable bonus towards the end of the year. I'm thinking this is over after I hang up, but wouldn't you know, a few days later, I'm back at work and who shows up? The young couple. Now, if my math is correct, they did away with the rest of the vacation and they came here roughly 4 days early. Bear in mind, we're going back more than a few years, and I'm not entirely sure of the exact number, but they definitely cut it short. I come into work, coffee and bear claw in hand, and just as I set my meager I was in a rush breakfast on my desk, my boss calls me into his office, and he's not angry. I can see that clearly. He had more of a look of urgency and disbelief on his face. The 2 girls are sitting at his desk, and they look visibly upset, This wasn't the type of upset that happens when you have some entitled person standing in the grocery line, screaming at the cashier because they refused to take a coupon from 2004. This was the type of upset where something happened and they needed to talk to somebody. I sat at the third chair next to his desk and the girls began to tell me everything that happened while they were there. Now the other girl, the other half of this couple, sat there holding hands with the cheetah print tattoo girl. They had to take their time speaking because I could tell they were trying to maintain some sense of dignity. Her partner finally speaks up. She adjusts her glasses, and I can tell she's been crying due to the redness in her face and the mist building up in her lenses. "It was terrible," is the first thing she manages to choke out, with that tell-all raspy voice that said she was fighting back tears. "At first it was great. We got dressed up in our fursuits, went down on the dance floor, and were having a great time. We didn't touch any alcohol. I'm straight edge, so is she. But as the dance floor filled up, the deviants came out of the woodwork. This was everything, every messed up stereotype about the furry fandom, all trapped in one room. We got separated, 3 furries cornered me and began groping me. It wasn't until Tina," she pointed to her partner, the girl with the tattoos, "came back from using the restroom that she noticed what was going on and put a stop to it. We spent the rest of the night in the room while she convinced me to file the police report." The girl reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. Sure enough, she produced a neatly folded police report detailing the entire incident. Tina hugged her partner and looked over at my boss and said, "Look, before we go any further, you had the same amount of knowledge that this would happen as we did. We don't blame you, we're not angry at you. But we need to know if there's some way you can work with us." My boss started to give his spiel about the company having a no refunds policy. He'd recited it so many times that I knew how it was going to open up. Before he could get to word number 3, I interrupted. These 2 girls were looking to have a good time, and instead they were victimized by a group of disgusting people. I can shed a bit more light on this situation, that is, if my sister is willing to talk about it. She was at that hotel, and she witnessed everything firsthand. My boss stops and thinks for a second before telling me to go ahead and call her. I give her a call, and she answers her phone. I explain what we have going on in the office, and she tells me she's currently going through a mountain of paperwork. It was everything from supplies needed to repair of all the damages to multiple police reports filed by patrons and the hotel themselves. I pretty much beg her to at least give an abridged version of what happened, and when my boss hears about flushed adult diapers, the elevator incident, and the amount of damage caused to this establishment, his tone completely changes. As a matter of fact, if we go into present day, it was enough to make him rethink the whole no refunds thing. He thanks my sister for her time. And after I do the same, I asked her to keep me posted, and I let her go. He looks over at these 2 girls and says, "Okay, ladies, I am truly sorry for how this vacation turned out. Nobody should have to go through the things you did, let alone before to file a police report. I can refund you the cost of the hotel and the plane tickets if that would work. Alternatively, we can open up a profile for you, and I can leave an IOU voucher in there that will at least cover the majority of another vacation's cost, should you choose to work with us again." But they thought about it for a minute before speaking up. The petite girl with the glasses was the first one to say something. "My family's originally from Toronto. I haven't been back there since I was a little girl. I think I would love to go back to see how it's changed. But we can't do that until I have more vacation time saved up from work." Tina looks at her and asks her if she's sure that's what she wants, and her partner just nods. So Tina rubs her shoulders and continues comforting her before turning her attention back to my boss and I. It's kind of the same story for me. I work at loading dock, and it takes a while for me to build vacation time there. So how would you be able to work this? How long is this going to be hanging in the breeze, so to speak? It's at this point my boss starts comparing packages on his computer, and luckily for them, it was only a $150 difference. He tells them not only will the impending do-over trip be in the system as long as it takes for them to cash it in, they'll even eat the difference. And as much of a pencil pusher as my boss can be, the man honored that a little over a year later. I would later come to find out that girl's name. She went by Franny. Franny and Tina went through hell trying to get justice for the entire matter. After all, these were people in costume, so she didn't see any faces. Thanks to security camera footage in the hallways and a joint effort from my sister's hotel chain, because let's face it, they wanted to nail as many of these vandals and sickos to the wall as possible, She was able to pinpoint 2 out of the 3 people as they came out of the hotel rooms in costume. Backtracking and finding the check-in records, we're able to put identities to people in that room. 2 out of the 3 people who cornered her that day and began touching her without her consent were other women. She was able to take them to court, and that third person, a 19-year-old male, was found in the process. I don't exactly remember what they were charged with, but I do remember Franny and Tina coming into my office to tell me what came of everything. They felt things were finally put right after all that time. They eventually cashed in that trip to Toronto, and up until 2022, when they let me know they were moving out of the state, they were regular customers. Any trip that didn't involve a 3 to 4 hour drive went through us. They were thankful for the fact that not only did we listen to their story, I backed them up and we did right by them. Wherever they are, I hope they're doing well. Those 2 girls are incredibly sweet people and they deserve all of the happiness life throws their way. As far as my sister goes, she's still a hotel inspector, and she ended up meeting her husband on the road. So now she only does about half of the workload she was doing, and in many instances, he's able to travel with her. But the word convention still sends a shiver up her spine. She told me during Thanksgiving one year that damn convention caused her to start doing research before she recommended any more to anybody else. Thankfully, nothing was as bad as this. A few outliers here and there, but even then, nothing is extreme. She also came to find that certain conventions, surprisingly and particularly horror conventions, usually bring out some of the most chill people she's ever been around. She's even gone to a couple herself. Her favorite was one that took place in Atlanta a few years back. She got a chance to meet Kane Hodder, widely considered to be the most inspiring version of Jason Voorhees, and a good portion of the cast of The Walking Dead. That was a great conversation. It was nice to hear her use the word convention in a positive light. But her husband and I would really appreciate if she would stop glossing over the fact that she got to hug Jeffrey Dean Morgan. But in my case, that's just the jealous sister talking. In closing, I'd like to say I purposely left the name of the convention in question out of the story because I feel as if the internet gave it enough attention, and it really was a horror show. But if you're curious, a simple Google search of Furry Convention Seattle 2015 should give you all of the cliff notes. But keep in mind, there's a big difference when it comes down to reading about it versus actually being there. And now my sister has one hell of a war story to tell, should anybody be willing to listen. 4. Guest calls me very early on Saturday morning and opens the conversation with, "Hi, good morning, I really screwed this up." He tells me that he's booking a room for his oldest son and nephew because they were staying in the general area for a funeral of a friend of theirs. However, he tells me he was sleeping this morning and selected the wrong hotel. The hotel he wanted to choose is about 20 minutes away driving from where my hotel is. Understandable. So I pull up his reservation and see that he has, unfortunately, paid for the entire stay using points. This is my first hotel gig, so what my manager says to me is Bible because I literally do not know this industry yet. She also has a tendency to micromanage, and I do not care enough about this weekend job to go against what she wants. So she tells me to never under any circumstances touch reservations booked through points. Me no touchy. I inform the guest that I am unable to cancel his reservation because of the way he has booked it and give him the support line number. He's a bit frustrated, but he understands that it's his fault, so he called. First rep calls the front desk like 15 minutes later, and it's obvious the guest changed up the story. Now it's that his father has died and he's getting his underage kids to a funeral for their grandfather. I didn't bother correcting the rep. I just told him that I can't do anything about it because of policy. He scoffs at me and says he wants to speak to a manager. I try to explain that she won't be in for a few days, but he cuts me off and says, "Just transfer me." Done, transferred, and sent to voicemail. Second rep calls. It's a woman, this time saying that the son is the one on the line with her now, crying about the messed up reservation. But the son seems to think that it's my fault for booking him at my hotel instead of the other one. I tell the rep that I didn't even make the reservation. She insists that someone at my hotel must have made the reservation. One quick confirmation number over and she says, "Okay, I'll handle it on my end." Then she just hangs up on me. Weird, but okay. The third rep calls. It's a different male rep, who says the wife of the person who booked is very upset because she insists that her husband wouldn't have made that stupid of a mistake, and clearly we did something to swipe the business from the other hotel. Thankfully, I didn't have to tell the rep how stupid that sounded. He starts telling me to just cancel the reservation on my end so he can get them rebooked. I tell him no, that is against policy as per my manager. He says that he's just trying to help the customer and I just need to push the button. I say that I can't and he asks why. I repeat that it is against the policy set by my manager and I will not be canceling the reservation. He again just tells me that it's not a big deal and that he's never heard of such a crazy policy from a hotel, and that I was holding a customer hostage and keeping his kids from seeing their dead grandfather. May I just remind everyone again that my hotel and the hotel they wanted to go to are less than half an hour away from each other. So I finally get sick of him and transfer him to my manager's voicemail. Now the guest calls again. He's frustrated but trying to keep his calm when I tell him that I am not permitted to touch his reservation because of how it was booked. So he then asks me this question. Don't you think your manager would want you to make a judgment call here? No. No, she would not. And I say, I apologize, sir, but I am nobody to go against company policy and speak for my supervisors. She is the manager for a reason. He relents and leaves her a voicemail. Guess who shows up the next day at check-in? The son and nephew, who are both in their early 30s, and inform me that the funeral they have to go to is actually only 5 minutes away from my hotel. It took all my power not to scream. 5. So I'm working in a nicer German hotel, which closes the restaurant on a Sunday, as we usually don't have a lot of guests staying over. Half of our rooms are equipped with an AC, while the other rooms aren't, but are more spacious. This lovely Canadian woman, she arrives and wants to check in a hurry. Welcome, I can check you in immediately after you fill out the registration card, which is a requirement of all our guests here in Germany.
Yeah, where can I park? I just want to go to my room, so can you hand me out the room cards?
Sure, but first you have to fill out the registration card, as we are not allowed to accommodate you if you don't fill it out. I saw you made a reservation in one of our rooms without an AC. Would you like to move your reservation to one of our rooms with an AC on the other side of the hotel, which is equal price but is equipped with one? I can also give you a twin bedroom to make up for the king-size bed.
No AC? The heat is killing me. Sure, but I want a room with a lake view.
The check-in went as usual, but I felt like she didn't really understand what I wanted to tell her. I told her to come back if she's not sure about something so I can repeat it. 10 minutes later,
the AC isn't working.
Should I check on it?
Also, the room is way too far from here. The windows in the room in general is not clean at all. The room has no king-size bed as I ordered, and the restaurant is closed without communicating it.
I'm sorry for that. I can also offer you the original room, which is way closer but has no AC. I told you the category with AC has no king-sized beds. But I picked a room with twin beds, so you almost have the same measurements. We have it on our website, on all third parties, and even put it in all our signatures that our restaurant is closed on Sundays. That's why the rate is lower.
I stayed here in Germany for 2 nights, and this never happened to me before. I would like to cancel and just go to another hotel that can offer me a clean room and dinner.
Me, now tired of her complaining, say, I'm sorry, if you're so disappointed with our house, you can ask to cancel our reservation on Expedia, and I will agree to cancel it without any fees.
That's terrible hospitality you're showing here. I am a paying guest, and you should treat me and your guests better. I want to speak with the manager tomorrow and complain about you.
Even after all this, I went to her room and checked the AC, and guess what? It's working. Never had Canadian vacation guests before, but is it so casual to not check out conditions in foreign countries and just expect the same experience you have in your home country? Update. After I offered the free cancellation earlier, she came back right before my shift ended. She now demands full refund and still stays in the room for the night for the not functional AC, which she didn't even book and is working fine. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Coahw, episode 153. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Please hit the like button before you go. It helps YouTube recommend the video to others. We love it when they do that. If you'd like early access to my videos, then support me on my Patreon page, where you get the videos all at once on a Monday as a thank you. You'll also find links in the description to my Discord server, as well as my merchandise store on Teespring. You can also leave a tip if you like by clicking on the heart with the $sign underneath the video. And while that's not required, it is very much appreciated. Okay. No other business today, so let's move along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, what's the name of the last book you read? Rather, the last new book you read, not counting books you've read in the past. So, new to you. For me, it's Fan Fiction by Brent Spiner. It came out not too long ago. Brent Spiner, who plays Lieutenant Commander Data in Star Trek. And it is actually somewhat loosely Star Trek tied in. It's a quasi-autobiographical, as in there are elements from real life in there, but it is mostly fiction, as I'm given to understand it. It's a detective story where he's got a stalker, and the mystery unfolds trying to figure out who the stalker is. So he gets a bodyguard who's the twin of the FBI agent who's monitoring the situation. And we have the audiobook is great because it's got all the Star Trek people who've come out to reprise the roles. Well, reprise the roles. They're playing themselves as they would have been in the 1980s, 1990s while working on Star Trek. So it's quite interesting to see how there are true things woven into the story, such as the passing of Gene Roddenberry. And, of course, the obvious fiction. That's mine. I definitely recommend you pick it up if you get a chance, especially if you enjoy Star Trek and you like the sound of Brent Spiner's voice. I would recommend the audiobook. Why don't you let me know what yours are in a comment below. And before we go, let's take a look at the answer of the day from a previous video. And today's answer comes from Coahw 152, and this was about foods you just can't get enough of. And today's answer comes from Little Dreamerum. Curry. I love all kinds everywhere. Did you know that curry powder works on popcorn? It's the only curry fix I have apart from hitting up Indian or Thai restaurants since I'm banned from making curry in the house I live in. Thank you very much for your answer, Little Dreamerum. That's a cruel thing, banning you from making curry in the house. I suspect it's not so much that you weren't good at it as you just made too many curries. So people rebelled. I haven't made a curry for a while. Well, actually, I made a korma a little while back, but I need to get that Chinese curry sauce I like. I know I can order small tubs from Amazon, so I'm very, very tempted. They'll last a while. Okay, with that, I'm going to go think about curry and mushrooms and rice and things. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.